Olive oil. You don't buy it, you make it. That statement changed the direction of my guest's life so much so that she moved to Italy and became an award winning olive oil producer and founder of Olio della Donna. Join me and Elaine Trigiani to hear the rest of that story and learn all about the one ingredient I would never live without, olive oil. Elaine, welcome to Midwest Meets Mediterranean. How's the weather in Tuscany?
It's kind of gray and chilly today, but it's nice to be on the air with you.
It's gray and chilly here too, and we
Uh,
just got out of the single digits. So, what's the temp?
we have probably 10 Celsius, which is what, 40 something. It's not that
Oh,
bad.
okay.
So, are you above freezing?
Yes, today, not
That's good.
yesterday, but today we are. So, you and I have so much in common, and beyond being somewhat cousins by marriage, we both had our lives completely redirected by Italy. So for me, it happened over many, many trips, spending time with family in northern Italy and many other parts of Italy, and finally deciding in Positano to become a chef. So those experiences changed how I saw food and eventually led me to cook professionally. And for you, it was Sicily and olive oil. Now, I read you were the art historian at the National Gallery in DC, about as far from
Exactly.
working with the land as you can get, I think. So what happened in Sicily that made you think this is it? This is what I'm supposed to do.
I really fell in love with olive oil, which I know sounds crazy, but I had never had good olive oil before. So I went to Sicily and I was actually there for work, but I met my relatives and spent a lot of time with them. And I just fell in love with olive oil and the way it works in cooking. And it just sort of made me start to rethink everything. And I was kind of at a crossroads when I got there in the event. So I guess I was receptive to the idea. And my aunt, who I would love to show you a picture of, if you give me 2 seconds, I'll show you a
Sure.
picture of my aunt. So she said to me, I had been in Sicily for sort of several months and I discovered olive oil, but also discovered, obviously Mediterranean diet and how people eat here. And then as I was leaving, I asked my aunt where I could buy some olive oil. And, I said, "Oh, I really love the olive oil. Where could I buy some olive oil?" And she said, "Well, she goes, you don't buy it, you make it." And I was like, "Oh, well, there's an idea." And this is my aunt.
Oh
That
my
is
gosh.
Francesca
Beautiful.
Canizzaro. Yeah, she was something. She passed away at 100 years and 4 months last month.
That
So I was at
Mediterranean
her 100th
diet.
birthday party. I know, it takes you far.
You hadn't traveled there before, so this was a work trip, and you connected with family. And I, like you, did not grow up with good olive oil, or Parmesan cheese came in a can. So after you made this decision, which, I mean, did that happen right away? Were you kind of deciding it while you were in Sicily?
Not necessarily, but like I said, I was receptive, and that just sort of kept playing around in the back of my head. And um, the you don't buy it, you make it. And I started learning more and more about olive oil, and I really wanted to produce an olive oil, and so just sort of really sort of learning about that, and then how it's done, and what is olive oil even really, and all of that. So I started making trips to Italy really for that reason. And then I don't know, it just sort of morphed into culinary tourism, which is what I've been doing for the past 20 years, 25 years. And I just sort of slowly, I was going back and forth. And before, at a certain point, I just had more stuff than would fit in a suitcase. And I decided, okay, I think I'll just, let's just, go ahead and stay here, say it out loud kind of thing. So
So
it
in
happened kind of.
in Sicily, that's where you. landed first?
Well, I actually was in Sicily first, and then I landed in Tuscany, which is where I live today. I have some friends up here, so I ended up kind of establishing a home base here. But I do spend time in Sicily. I'm down there a lot with clients, and as part of my olive oil production as well. So
Right now, you're in a 200-year-old farmhouse on the grounds of a medieval castle in Tuscany.
I think it's probably more like a 500-year-old farmhouse. And yeah, so on the grounds of this castle.
When you go back to Mississippi to visit and tell people what your life looks like, how do they react?
Yeah, people ask me, I don't think they really get it. It's kind of hard to describe. I know it's just hard to describe, even when, um, or even I don't know. You just have to be here to sort of, it's just it's very it's quite different. I live
Well,
in this really it's a small community, and um, I've a lot of my good friends live right here. My boyfriend lives right here. We're all just sort of in and out of each other's spaces all the time. It's nice. We have a lot of space outside. We have, gazebos here and there, and a pizza oven and whatnot. We're constantly, whipping up suppers together and that kind of thing. So it's fun.
so how long did it take you to acclimate, not just to the people and feel, that you're part of this warm community, but the language? How long did it take you to master that?
Oh, well, it took me a good 2 years to really master the language and be able to fully participate.
Mhm.
But I'm definitely still the American, you know. I feel American, and I should say United States, but I'm definitely, not full on Italian, which is clear just from my accent, right? And
Right.
just, you can't really, um, your background and 35 years of living in a place and being born into a place, that obviously stays with you.
Yes. Well, I know that in my travels there, if I could ever get one moment of an Italian thinking I might be Italian, it was like an accomplishment which didn't last. The second I opened my mouth, it was like, okay, that's over. Uh,
Right. Well, you can do your best to understand them and the culture, but um, I just think no matter who you are, where you go, you can sort of integrate, but I think your background sticks with you.
thing. My grandmother always told me that you would know that you were starting to really be a part of the language if you could tell a joke or understand a joke.
Yeah, I agree with that.
So, in terms of the olive trees, are some of them on the property that you are on, and are you actually working those trees?
I am actually working trees. They're not right here. I actually rent from the Count and Countess at the castle here where I live. So there's a lot of olive groves right here, but they're not mine. They belong to the Countess up in the castle. So my groves are literally kind of 5 minutes up the street. So in this period, we are doing some pruning, and it's a grove. That particular grove is one that we recovered. I like to say we. It makes me feel better about everything, but
Mm-hmm.
basically it's me. So I decided to recover this olive grove, which had been abandoned for probably 15 years. And it was kind of like a forest. And I do have plenty of help. So I had some guys come in and just clean out, all of the undergrowth. And it was thick. You couldn't get through it in some points. And then the trees had to be cut way back. So this year will be 2026 will be our first harvest out of that grove. We did this 3 years ago. So right now we're trying to kind of maintain or encourage anyway the trees to kind of grow back into shape. So we literally cut them off. Some of them had not even any leaves left, right? We just chopped them way back, which of course caused them to just sprout out tons of shoots. So I'm currently hacking away all the shoots at the bottom of the tree, and then we're going in and carefully pruning to try to give it a shape that works for us so that we can then harvest the fruit.
3 years it takes for them to come back and
Hmm.
bear. Wow. You are still doing, you mentioned you're still doing some of your tours.
Hmm.
And how often do you do them? And what kind of people sign up for them?
Well, every year is different, and I have a lot of repeat clients. So this year I have 3 trips on the books for people off my mailing list, and then I'm also doing 3 trips. One of which starts at the end of this month with private groups, so groups of formed friends who've kind of come together to form a group. And I've got three of these groups this year, and they've all traveled with me before, so we have a good time. And we're going to Sicily, and there's one in Emilia Romagna that's going to go into Piedmont, the area of Barolo, the big wine producing zone, and then finish up in the lake region, and then down in Puglia in the fall. So Sicily, Emilia Romagna, Tuscany, and Puglia.
And speaking of the lake region, you were mentioned in our mutual cousin Adriana Trigiani's book, The View from Lake Como. That must have been so fun.
Mm-hmm.
So did you
Definitely, yeah.
did you see a lot of enthusiasm coming from that?
I definitely get, yeah, Adri's got a ton of fans, so
Mhm.
that always helps. So, yeah, she helps me spread the word. I appreciate that for sure. Yeah. They're
Okay.
actually coming over here for Easter.
Oh,
I don't know if you've talked to them
wonderful.
about that. So I get to see them. Some of the sisters are coming over for Easter.
Oh, wonderful. I've always wanted to go on one of those Trigiani trips. I see the pictures.
Hmm.
Lots of pictures. So we're going to take a little break, and when we come back, we'll talk about what actually makes your oils so unique, specifically, and we'll uncover the secrets of Piero and La Storia. This episode is brought to you by Bonicelli Cooking Club, home of the Mindful Mediterranean program. If you're looking for simple, seasonal recipes, practical cooking strategies, and a more joyful way to approach food, you will find it here. Visit BonicelliCookingClub.com to learn more. Now I want to talk about your oils. As a chef, I use your oils in my kitchen and in teaching. And of course, I notice how completely different your Tuscan oil is from your Sicilian oil. They're like two different languages of flavor. So let's start with La Storia. Your family owned land in Sicily since the 1700s. So
Hmm.
much of Italian culture and food is about land and legacy. So, what does it mean to you to make oil from your family's ancestral ground?
Well, that really, I mean, it's the reason that I'm here in Italy, the reason I moved abroad, and then it's really the impetus for this whole project. So I happen to really like the flavor of the Sicilian oils, as well as the Tuscan oils, and other oils. But yeah, to me, the reason for this project goes back to Aunt Francesca, and then I actually call the company Olio della Donna, which is named for a contrada della Donna. That's an area of the countryside outside of Poggioreale. So Poggioreale is this little town in the northwest of Sicily where my family comes from, and the property that they owned was in the Contrada della Donna, this area. So I used that name, the Della Donna name, for my olive oil company. And then La Storia, the olive oil itself, I call it that, the history, because that's the history of this project. I mean, that's where this whole thing comes from. The fact that my family had the link to the land there in Poggioreale.
Okay, so you're buying or curating, if you will, the olives. So are those, oh, there it is. Are those individual,
This is La Storia. Excuse me?
are these relationships that you have with these growers, they're individual relationships, not a co-op situation. So you actually know these
Yes,
people.
absolutely.
How do
Yes,
you,
absolutely. So I collaborate with farmers in Sicily on La Storia, this olive oil, which is made from Nocellara del Belice and Bianco di la olives. So we talk about the harvest and we decide sort of the flavor profile. Nocellara del Belice is super spicy and kind of strong, and Bianco Lila is a little. The oils from Bianco Lila olives are a little bit more delicate. So we always kind of we work together on a blend of the local olives, which sort of meant to produce the La Storia olive oil.
okay, tell me about the artwork on the bottle.
Well, both bottles have works of art. The La Storia has a watercolor by an artist called Andrew Bucci, who's an Italian American artist from Mississippi, actually. And he's sort of a cousin by marriage on the other side of my family, so related in the same way that we are. So Andrew Bucci was prolific. He passed away relatively recently, and his niece, Margaret Bucci, runs the foundation. But if anyone's interested in this kind of thing, check him out on Instagram. Andrew Bucci, wonderful, wonderful artist. And again, kind of part of our family. And then the label on Piero is a watercolor, an oil painting by my neighbor and good friend, Rita Pedula. And she, I'm trying to, it doesn't show up so well on the camera. She painted this painting, it's quite large, of this woman with the olive branch as her spine in about 2014 or 15. And when I saw it, I was like, that is going to be my logo. You know, that is going to be of my olive oil company one day when I open my olive oil company, which I eventually did. But to me, that just kind of says it all. So Olio della Donna with the woman with her spine as an olive branch.
Beautiful. So you're producing oil in both Sicily and Tuscany, which has to be really complex with different harvest times and different varietals and different climate risks. Why take on that challenge instead of focusing on just one?
Well, so I collaborate with the farmers in Sicily, which kind of takes the heat off of me because they're dealing with the day-to-day stuff that I'm dealing with up here in Tuscany. And usually, but not always, the Sicilian harvest is usually a good month before the Tuscan harvest. The past 2 years, they've started overlapping, which does make it a little difficult, but we make it work out. So the reason I did it, though, really is for the nostalgia end of it with the Sicilian oil, and then to have oils with such different flavor profiles, like you
Yes.
like you mentioned. So the Sicilian oil, because of the kinds of olives that are grown in Sicily, and specifically to that area of Sicily, has a very kind of fruity, spicy, tomatoey type of flavor profile, whereas the Tuscan oils come from totally different varieties of olives. In this case, it's Moraiolo, Frantoio, Maurino. There's a little bit of Pendolino in there, and just has a completely different flavor profile. And I have a couple other bottles back there from colleagues of mine. That tall white one is from the South, from a colleague
We can't see it. Can you just pick it up?
Sure, here it is. This is an oil from Le Tre Colonne, Salvatore Stallone, down in Giovinazzo near Bari in Puglia. And this oil is made from Bella di Cerignola olives, and actually has more of a sweet, kind of a pea, very fresh sweet pea aroma. And it's just excellent on fish. And like if you like, we always use it for grilled squid. Excellent. So it's fun to have all these different oils in the kitchen. And then I like being able to offer, a couple different olive oils. So sometimes I make a monocultivar if I have enough production of a Tuscan olive. This year I didn't have that, so I just made my blend Piero. And then, of course, the Sicilian oil, which has such a totally different flavor profile. So that's kind of why I chose to do that, even though it complicates my life. It's worth it.
This is great. You've answered many of my questions. I can just let you go, and I'm getting everything I want. So tell me a little bit about Piero Dogolini. Is that his name?
That is. I'm going to show you a picture of Piero too, since I showed you
Okay.
a picture of Aunt Francesca. I'll show you a picture of Piero. So Piero, here he is. Here's Piero. He
Pull it
there he
more.
is.
There we go. Okay.
Okay.
Oh yeah, look at him. Oh my goodness.
I know, right? I know, Piero.
Look at those
So funny.
muscles.
I know, it's crazy. Age 80.
Wow.
He was my best friend when I first moved to Tuscany. He passed away in 2010. But he also inspired me to do this project. I mean, he just really taught me about farming and also cooking. Several of my recipes are from directly from Piero. He was so cute. He never got married, and he liked to eat. So he would always, I mean, he worked and had a, big piece of land he took care of, chickens, whatnot. Um, but he always cooked himself a lovely lunch and set the table with the tablecloth and flowers and stuff. It was so cute. So we used to eat together all the time. Um, but he really taught me a lot about really olive oil, the tradition of olive oil in the kitchen, and kind of what it means to have oil in the kitchen, which, if you don't have oil, it's kind of like not having flour for bread or pasta,
Mm-hmm.
which in Italy, like that's like something's wrong. So I mean, it's a big deal to have your supply, your year's supply. You make your year's supply of oil every fall with your year's supply of wine as well. So that was something good that I learned from him, as well as kind of an approach to farming that I haven't quite managed yet. I'm not there yet. And I call it my inner farmer zen, which I do not have. I fret. And so, Piero was the kind of person who just did things in stride. And in general, here in Tuscany, the main crops are grapes and olives. And for forever, since they were first planted here by the ancient Greeks, they have kind of gone in harmony with each other. And again, climate change is starting to make it so that things are starting to overlap. And just in general, the weather, of course, even without, I mean, just you never know what's going to happen. So that's why I try to channel my inner farmer zen, because you just have to be chill about it and take what you have and do your best. So I would have preferred, for example, to be, much ahead of where I am now with the pruning. It needs to be completed by the end of March. And if it doesn't stop raining, then that's not going to happen. And that's going to have to be okay.
So in terms of years, 2024 was a good year in terms of volume, right? I think that's right. You were coming off of that when you and I met. And then 2025 was less of an abundant year. So what do you do to overcome a rough year?
There are certain things. So part of it is that the reason for olives, for example, have they have an alternating production, so they tend to produce a lot one year and then not the next. Um, there's things you can try to do to kind of balance that out a little bit. Most of that's pruning and fertilizing, but there are other things that are, in fact, linked to climate. So if it rains in the wrong period, then you're going to have fewer olives. That happened last year. It rained a lot during the flowering period. So the olives, the flowers are just these minute, tiny little things, and they're pollinated just by the wind. It's just sort of, pollen floating around there. And if it just rains all the time, then that doesn't happen. And that's what happened last year. And then on top of that, just because of when it rained and how the soil reacted, there was a lot of humidity, which was great for, unfortunately, the fruit flies. So we lost some production because of fruit fly infestation. Most of the area of Tuscany where I live, everybody was just slammed with that. Whereas 2 harvests ago, it was just sort of miraculously, they didn't bother to come over here. I don't know where they were, but the fruit flies. But we got a pass in 2024. So one way to I think, again, you need some zen in there, because you just need to find some inner peace with it, because you do your best and then go with what Mother Nature gives you each year. So it's difficult. Last year was difficult. I didn't make very much oil, but we're just trying to make it work. So.
Well, here in Minnesota, we have a very short growing season. And I'm the Minneapolis Farmers Market chef, so I demo there throughout the year. And it's every year it's like, well, we have a drought. Well, we have too much rain. There's so much to overcome. And I finally just decided that you have to be brave to farm. You just like you said, the inner zen, and I see it in some people at the farmers market where they're so good at looking at the long picture instead of what's happening in the moment, that they don't freak out. They just
Right. Well, you have to be that way or you're going to drive yourself crazy. I'm a perfectionist and I am just learning to say, I'm going to do my best.
Hmm.
And the result is the result. And then another thing is to look at it in, maybe not so much as good years and bad years, but just different years. Every year is different.
Yes. Let's get back to Piero for a second, actual Piero Dogolini. Um, I read that he used a filtration system that is really unique.
What was most unique about him, he was born in the 1920s, and so he was a typical Tuscan farmer, and he was really hard-headed, as a lot of those guys are. But he very much believed in the newfangled equipment for olive production. So he believed in technology where it can help out. And he did not believe in technology or newfangled procedures where he did not think it helps out. And I kind of tended to agree with him. I mean, for example, Piero did not like wine that had been aged in a barrel. He thought that was the most ridiculous thing he'd ever heard of it. He didn't think that it had anything to do with Tuscan wine, and he's right. So for Tuscan wines, that I totally agree with him. He always used what they call botti, which are these gigantic, taller than this room or as tall as this room, chestnut barrels, enormous to age their wine in, but not the small oak barrels. So that he was completely against this sort of modern thing that had been introduced, and he made wine as well. And then on the olive production, though, like he realized that the new technology that has been developed here in Tuscany by this group who has seriously studied olives, olive oil, and production methods for decades, and they're really working on producing quality olive oils. But he realized that was the way to go. And part of that is filtering your olive oil. And what happens when you filter olive oil is that you actually lose a little bit because it just gets kind of absorbed by the filters. But your olive oil lasts infinitely longer. It stays better for longer. It maintains its health benefits for literally infinitely longer. An oil that's not filtered is going to start to oxidize immediately, and it's going to start to show signs of oxidation, and it's going to head towards rancidity within 8 months of pressing, generally, more or less. So filtering your oil keeps it better longer. And he knew that. He tried it once and he realized that the oil stayed, fresher longer. So I thought, he was just very reasonable like that. There are a lot of, sort of local farmers around here today who don't want to talk about filtering your oil because you might lose some. They just want quantity. They're looking for quantity over quality. But if you're looking for quality, which is flavor, but also health benefits, then filtration is essential.
Well, when we come back, we're going to talk about some of those specifics, like hot pressing and cold pressing. We'll be right back. This episode is brought to you by Bonicelli Cooking Club, home of the Mindful Mediterranean program. If you're looking for simple, seasonal recipes, practical cooking strategies, and a more joyful way to approach food, you will find it here. Visit BonicelliCookingClub.com to learn more. Welcome back, everyone. Elaine, you have incredible credentials. You're officially certified as an olive oil taster by the Regione Toscana. Did I say that properly?
Yes, you
And
did.
as a wine taster by ONAV. So this is government recognized expertise. So I want to help our listeners become better olive oil consumers. But honestly, most people in America get so much contrary information and there's so much on the shelves. And to further complicate things, we have shops with infused oils that we can buy in bulk that never mention a single producer or source. And it's all really confusing. So, what does the certification process actually involve, and how did you train your palate to detect defects and quality markers at that level?
The certification course was offered by that I took, which has been ages ago, probably 15 years ago, offered by the lab at the Chamber of Commerce in the city of Florence. So this is the lab that analyzes olive oils and wines for, Tuscany and Chianti. And it was taught by one of the guys who helped develop the mill that I spoke about earlier. And he led the course and designed the course. And then we had, sessions with chemists and agronomists and farmers. And then we had it was, I can't remember how long it was, 4 or 5 or 6 months long. And we had these tasting sessions where they would put out, a series of kind of 12 different oils. We might concentrate on a defect one day and, just smell the various, iterations of the defect. We would have to, the final exam, I remember we had to, I think we had to put them in order, if I remember correctly. So we had all of these aromas, and you had to sort of put them in order just by smelling them, and then kind of play in musical chairs or whatever with these olive oils. So we learned about what causes the defects, why they would be present in an olive oil, what they smell like, and then the gradations of them as well. Because what starts off small turns into terribly unpleasant flavor in a short period of time. And it's important to keep in mind that any defect from the production process affects aroma and flavor, and it also affects health benefits. So, if you're one of the main things I like about olive oil is that it's so good for you. I mean, it's good and good for you. And the stronger the flavor, the good flavor, the better it is for you. So to me, that's very important. I don't just use it because it's greasy. I use it because it's good for me. So to me, that's a very important component of olive oil. I don't want to use an oil that doesn't have the health benefits. I'd rather use something else at that point.
So essentially, the training that you went through is very similar to being a sommelier
Yes,
of olive oil. Okay, and when you taste, um, color doesn't matter, right? You're tasting in dark
exactly.
glasses. I learned that when I was in
So yeah,
Spain.
color does not matter. Color's kind of fun to look at. So sometimes actually, I actually personally I use these cups when I taste, just something like this. And I like to look at the color just so I know what it is. But some varieties are more golden and some varieties are more green. And usually the oil that just comes out of the spigot at the mill is quite green, and then it just naturally goes to golden over time. So and that's fine. Super good olive oils do that. That's totally normal. But I don't mind, actually. I like to look, although you're not supposed to let it influence you. So
Right.
the taster who on the tasting panels at the lab at the Chamber of Commerce in Florence, or the ones at these sort of the panels that give out the awards and whatnot, they're all tasting in dark glasses, those dark blue glasses. But it is good to know that, for example, anything from pea green to golden is good, but once an oil starts to look kind of orange, then you've got a problem. So that's one reason that you might want to look at the color. But that's true. You don't generally take that into consideration when you're judging an olive oil.
Well, I know just in talking to people in my classes that because I ask them how they perceive the color, and they usually say, "Well, if it's a dark green, it's going to be bitter."
Oh,
So
interesting.
there is some
Not
association.
true.
Yeah. Yes.
I mean, there are plenty of very green oils that are not bitter, but
So when you taste food, do you think all this tasting of olive oil has influenced your tasting of food?
um, yes. But I mean, I think what has really influenced the tasting of food, which follows, yes, the tasting of olive oil and also wine, is the idea of having respect for the person who made the product. So, if you're tasting a wine from, whoever producer, or an olive oil or a cheese or bread or whatever, I mean, it's nice to know something about what went into the production. And then I just feel like these people spend so much of their time and energy on making a product for me. The least I can do is pay attention to it when I eat it. And I tend to pay a lot of attention on the first couple of bites, and then obviously, relax and enjoy a meal. But that has very much affected how I work with food or just, interact with food, basically.
For me, I think my first trip to Italy, I had never experienced a 3 to 4 hour meal in courses, and then and because I was with family, they were really entertaining us, so that kept happening and happening. And at first, it was very overwhelming for me. I certainly did taste the food, but it was a huge amount of food over time. And but what I started to ease into was people really take time eating. As you said, Piero set the table and sat down and ate. That is not an American concept unless it's a holiday. Um,
Right. I know.
I did not grow up that way, so it really put me into culture shock. But then every time I come back from a trip, I'm so slowed down and I'm so much more attentive to what I'm eating. So that just being in Italy influenced me in that way.
Yeah, that definitely the kind of being together at the table is very important.
So as far as the actual picking of the olives, I know that they have to be pressed very quickly. So tell me about that process a little bit.
We pick um, because of where the in Tuscany, because of the just the geography here, we it's all manual. You can't do any mechanized picking for the most part. So we put nets out under the trees, which is practice everywhere. The olives are going to fall down. They have to fall into something that you can then gather them. And we try to get the olives off the trees without harming the olives. Without an olive is almost like a cherry, and it will bruise very easily.
Mhm.
So we try to use methods to get the olives off the tree, either with these little rakes, or there are some battery operated, it's like a long pole with these kind of fingers on it that go like this and just kind of knock the olives down. And then of course, once the fruit comes off the tree, um, it in any event, the fruit contains then also the seed. So once you have taken the fruit off the tree, it's just gonna go bad, and the fruit thinks that the seed needs to sprout. So a whole series of enzymatic processes start, and it's not good for the quality of the olive oil that we want to eat. So once the olive is taken off the tree, it needs to be pressed as soon as possible. And 4 to 6 hours is really optimum. Um, I would, do my best to keep in that range. And I can generally make it in 6 hours, but you have to be super organized. But that's important.
So getting the pit out of the olive is part of the process.
Well, the pit usually gets milled up together with the pulp.
Okay.
And it contains a little bit of oil. Some of the flavors come from there as well. And actually, the mechanism in the milling, just the sharp edges of the pit, actually kind of play a role in what's happening to the chemical compounds and what's attaching to what. So that's, when an olive is milled, first it's crushed and then it's kind of the paste is kind of kneaded together. And that's the moment when the oil molecules are kind of latching on to the other components in the paste, such as the polyphenols, that's where all the health benefits are, a lot of the flavor as well, the color, those things tend to come together during that process. So the pit tends to play a role in there. There is some equipment, sometimes you can find what they call denotolato, an oil from a process where they have removed the pits. It's pretty specific. It has a relatively low yield, I believe, but it makes very nice, elegant olive oil. It's interesting. So if you ever come across that, it's not super common, but it's interesting to do a little taste test if you find it.
What is the difference between hot and cold pressing?
Um, Oil, obviously, if it's warmer, it's less viscous, right?
Mhm.
So if you use heat during the process, then you get a higher yield. So what happens is you squish the olives, This is for extra virgin or virgin olive oil. It's a mechanical process, so there's no chemical extraction going on. That's something else. So in the land of extra virgin or virgin olive oil, the olives are pressed mechanically. The paste is kind of kneaded around, and then there is basically a big centrifuge that spins everything inside of a big tube and separates the oil from the liquids and the solids. So if you were to use heat in this process, you could get a yield of about 60%, 60%, but you have caused oxidation to start before you even extract the oil away from the pulp. Heat causes oxidation to start, which leads to rancidity, which basically eats up the health benefits and the flavor, the good flavors. It leaves bad flavors. So if you keep the temperatures below 26 degrees centigrade, then you will fall into the extra virgin category or virgin category. So you'll have olive oils with good flavors and good health benefits, but your yield is considerably lower. So our yields here in Tuscany go from anywhere from sort of 9 to 13%, as opposed to 60%. So if you're heating it up, if you're using heat in the process. So clearly, the big brands who are interested in quantity then would be tempted to use some heat because you're getting that much more olive oil. Whereas people like me and my colleagues, we would never do that. We want to make high quality olive oil with good flavor profile and health benefits. So, we stick with what they call it cold pressing. There's actually no pressing involved whatsoever, but we make sure that we never go above 26 degrees centigrade.
Okay. So speaking of heat, do you use different oils for cooking than you would use for finishing?
Sometimes it depends on what I have in the house, basically. Um, I'll tend to use maybe an oil with maybe a lighter flavor profile while I'm cooking. So, very good quality extra virgin olive oil, but maybe if it has less complex aromas, I'll tend to use that in cooking. And that I would have that if someone gave me some oil, for example, or if I have some oil from last year, I might have a couple bottles, of last year's oil. I'll use that for cooking, as opposed to finishing. But I use only super high quality extra virgin also in cooking because, again, the health benefits, but also the flavors. If you don't, I think was it Julia Child who said, if you don't want to drink the wine, then you don't want to put it in your kitchen. You don't want to put it in your recipes. Same thing with olive oil. And unfortunately, bad quality olive oil has that often kind of a musty rancidity is one thing, but you can also get oils that taste kind of vinegary or any range of sort of these not very pleasant aromas. And unfortunately, those stick to your food and you can just taste it and it's just terrible. So, there's just no good reason to use anything other than good quality extra virgin.
How long does olive oil last and how should you store it?
It lasts, well, that depends on the quality to start with. If an oil starts out perfect, right, no oxidation whatsoever going on, then it can withstand, maybe it gets hot sitting somewhere, like in a truck on the way to the store or something like that, and it'll last. It can withstand those little, maybe a little blip in temperature, and it can withstand up to time as well. So an oil that starts out life very healthy will live a lot longer. It'll last a lot longer. So that's looking at things like the acidity level, which again, these are just numbers on a lab report, but that's what goes into the qualification of extra virgin olive oil versus other kinds of olive oil. And then the polyphenols, which are so good for our health, that also influences the lifespan of the olive oil. So an oil that was born kind of mediocre is going to go actually bad very quickly. An oil that was born, as close to perfect as you can get it, will actually last for several years if stored properly, which means in absence of air, heat, and light. So, I mean, there's, the oils tend to develop a little bit. Sometimes you might lose a little bit of the bitterness, which is considered one of the very good characteristics of olive oil, but you might maintain some spicy. Sometimes maybe the big fat grassy aroma tends to diminish a little bit, but maybe the almond aroma will then be more prevalent. So it does tend to develop a little bit over time. I had a bottle down in the wine cellar, which I was in the dark corner, which I literally just missed it, and I found it sort of after it was more than 5 years old. It must have been 6 or 7 years old, and it was still really good, but it had been in the dark, constant temperature, at constant cool temperature. So that's how oil needs to be stored. So at your home, even choose if you have a wine cellar wherever you keep your red wines, that's a good place to keep it. Not in the refrigerator because it will kind of coagulate a little bit, and then you have to bring it back to room temperature to get it to pour out of the jar, and that kind of temperature excursion is not good for the olive oil over time. I have found even, my parents, for example, I've given them some olive oil, so we have the same olive oil, right? I store it one way and they store it another way. So I kind of see how it acts. I'll keep it in the wine cellar and they've got it, on the high shelf in the pantry. Put it on the bottom shelf of the pantry. It makes a difference because it's hotter up there. So even those little um, um, sort of thoughts to where you store your oil will definitely help it live longer.
How can you tell if oil is rancid?
Well, rancid, y'all have probably all eaten like, I don't know, a pecan or a walnut or whatever that's old and rancid, or had even old peanut butter that's just been sitting around too long. That's kind of that, I don't even know how to better describe that flavor. It's kind of that acrid, just old
Acrid.
flavor. Olive oil, olive oil, as it goes through its life cycle, so it's going to live fine if it's in an unopened bottle in the dark in the cool. Once you open it, you just need to use it, and if you let it sit around, though, do not just use 2 drips on a salad every now and again, because the oil is going to go bad. That's just, it's a fat. It's going to eventually oxidize, and the sort of last step towards rancidity is when it smells like hay. So when it kind of smells like
Oh,
sweet hay, that's that's then you need to use all of it right away, because the next step is going to be rancid.
okay. That's good to know. I've actually had some friends run into that, and it made them quite ill. So
Oh no.
they should have smelled the olive oil. So when home cooks are here in America, standing looking at the shelves with all these different olive oils, what should they be looking for, and what should they stay away from?
Well, first of all, just read back labels. Don't read the front label. As I mentioned before, first cold press means literally nothing these days. There is no press. There's no press, much less 2 of them. So there's, that all that stuff, or unfiltered. And some people tout unfiltered on their label. That's actually good information. Skip it. Don't buy that. But the information that you want is on the back label. And you really want something that looks like it was made by a person, somebody like me or some one of my colleagues who cares about what they were doing. And there are hints of that on the back of labels. People will tell you, where the olives came from, when they were harvested. A lot of what goes on the label is required by law, so there's not just a heck of a lot of space to give you all of the kind of romantic bits. But there are bits and pieces on there that can help you figure out if it was a person who was behind the product and not, some huge company with offices in, Milan. I don't know. So one thing to look for is where the olives come from, and the really just, bad stuff to really, not even consider. Uses blends of oils from olives from various countries, and that'll be listed on the back of a bottle. I mean, you'll see it. It'll say things like, the olives came from, Italy, Turkey, Spain, Greece, and or Morocco. You know, don't do that. That's just not going to be a good olive oil. All of those countries make excellent olive oil, but when it becomes into the big blend and they're all, just mashed up together somewhere, then, but that's going to be poor olive oils from all these different places, sloshed together and put in a bottle. So that's definitely something to avoid. So you want to look for things that point to a farmer who made it, a person who actually cares about the product. You can also look for people's websites. Um, Standing there in the store, we've all got our phone with us. You can look up these different companies and just see what they're all about. You can purchase from people that you trust. Go to specialty shops where the buyer is an olive oil expert and very much cares about what they're getting in and can talk to you about the olive oils. You can buy olive oils online by people who do that kind of thing. You can also taste olive oils, hopefully, in some of these specialty shops. So that's a little bit of you want to make sure that, they haven't just stored a bottle, in the window and then had it open for 6 months and they give you a taste of it, because even a good oil at that point isn't going to taste very good. But if they're, opening bottles in the store for tastings, that's another good thing to do.
I know that the restrictions and qualifications put forth by the Italian government and Europe in general are quite strict. What are the differences between Europe and Italy and America and other countries producing olive oil?
I'm not sure what the actual labeling laws are. I'm not sure what the difference is. Um, because I make in Italy and sell in the United States, I try to satisfy both of them. I mean, basically, it's being very clear about the origins. And unfortunately, I mean, I think there are a lot of foods. Wine is one of them. The labeling laws are determined by lobbies from big corporations. So you're actually not allowed to say a lot of the things that would probably be more helpful. Wine labels can't tell you how many sulfites were added. They don't allow you to. They don't allow you to do that. Olive oil, they make you take up, a third of your label with a nutrition labeling thing. Like, it's fat. It's a fat. All it is fat. It's one ingredient and it's fat. It has none of that other stuff in it. So you have like this much of your label has a bunch of zeros going down it because there is no salt or sugar or carbohydrates or whatever. So anyway, I don't think there's a huge difference actually in labeling laws. And I don't believe there's a big difference either in inspections. Unfortunately, a lot of this is just like, Scout's honor. I certify that my oil is extra virgin or whatever it is. It's extra virgin. That's all I make. But I certify that. And then I go and get the lab reports and I have them. And if they come to inspect, I can show them the lab reports. And I've never had anybody come to inspect. And I've never even really heard much about that happening other than, big raids of fraudulent companies, which sometimes, has happened, as it does with any industry. So I also put my lab reports up on my website. So that's another thing you can look for, some transparency on the part of the producer. And a lot of us are doing that these days. So you can see things like number of polyphenols. You can see, the acidity level, free acids or whatever, free fatty acids. I just put that, just put the lab report right up on the website, and that takes away any ambiguity.
What would you say after your 20 years now in Italy and being a producer is the biggest misconception or myth about olive oil that you want to bust?
Actually, I think the biggest misconception is there's two. One there's three. One is you should not use good olive oil for cooking, which I think is completely ridiculous. completely, then if you're not, then why would, then don't use any good olive oil. Like, what's the point? Like, if you're going to put the bad olive oil in the pan and then the good olive oil on the top, then what is the point? So I don't agree with that. They did a study at the University of Naples, and they made French fries, and they fried, potatoes in olive oil for like 8 hours straight. And, and they did chemical analyses along the way. And at the end of the day, the olive oil, the end of the frying period, 8 hours of frying, the olive oil was still giving antioxidants to the potatoes. And then if you taste an olive oil right then and there, I mean, it clearly it's, you fried potatoes in it, but it's not a bad olive oil. If you then let that olive oil sit for a month, it turns into a bad olive oil. The oil that you actually had in the pan.
Right.
Um,
Well, any
so I mean,
oil
some people,
that's
you can
come in
actually
contact
strain
with
it.
food,
Right.
you know.
Exactly. But once you have heated the olive oil up, at that point, which is akin to the production process, the heat amount is probably lower than the frying pan. But if you heat it up to that amount over the months, it's just going to get worse and worse and worse. But it's not going to taste necessarily disgusting right then and there. So, and as they proved at the University of Naples, the health benefits are still there in frying, even after frying the same pan of oil for 8 hours. So, I mean, it's scientifically proven that yes, you can cook with high quality olive oil. And it's also, I mean, you can just prove it yourself by, just cook with some bad oil and taste it. It tastes gross. I taught a class at a culinary institute in South Carolina, and I brought the olive oil, and the pastry and baking class made a bunch of cakes, to sort of taste whatever after the class was done. And one of them was, I actually make the pound cake of my aunt, Ida Bonicelli. But hers, of course, used butter, and I have translated it into olive oil. And it's such a lovely, wonderful, very simple cake, right? There's nothing in it but sugar, eggs, flour, olive oil. You're done. So, if there's going to be anything kind of off, then you would definitely taste it. So when you make it with good olive oil, it tastes great. Well, the pastry and baking class at this culinary university, they ran out of oil, but they wanted to make a few more cakes, so they just used whatever it was they had in their kitchen, and it was horrible. And you could taste, you took one bite of it, just take one bite and you could tell. So, I mean, it really definitely makes a big difference. Another myth is that all Italian olive oils are fraud, and they're not. Some Italian olive oils are fraud, and it's because some Spanish olive oils are fraud also. But there are some oils that are fraudulent. But the ways that we talked about how to purchase, then you will not fall into the trap. So most
So
of the big
what are
companies.
they doing? Putting canola oil in, or
Well, they're either marketing something as extra virgin, which isn't,
right?
because it probably just doesn't have the quality to be extra virgin, and so that they're just putting that on the label. And it has happened in the past that people have, gotten, I don't know. I remember once hazelnut oil mixed with some green food coloring. I mean, that did not go to the United States. It remained in Europe, but I mean, that kind of thing. And the reason we know about it is because these people were arrested, right? They don't let that stuff fly. But there was a big expose on 60 Minutes or something a couple of years ago, which
Terribly dangerous considering how many people have tree nut allergies.
also, yeah, good point. Very good point. So that's extremely rare. And again, if you're looking for products that come from a farmer, you're really not going to run into that. So I think some people tend to just, avoid olive oil or avoid Italian olive oil because they heard there's fraud. There's fraud all over the place. And again, Italy's doing their best to not let any of that slip through. And if you purchase oils made by people who care about what they're doing so that you get good flavors and good health benefits, then you're really just not going to have that problem anyway. So I don't think that should stop people from buying Italian olive oil.
Okay, we have a third
Oh,
myth.
last myth. I was like, there is another one. The last myth and this is a new one, is that you should drink some every day. I'm like, I don't understand that. Why? Why would you drink it when you could just use it on your food, which is kind of what it was made to do. It was made to use on your food. So I think that's a little bit of a myth. I don't really see why you need to drink olive oil or take
What
a
about
tablespoon or whatever.
what about putting it on your skin?
Yeah, I think that's good too. The thing about olive oil, and I was talking to another producer who actually produces aromatics, and she makes those kind of what do you call it, like perfumed oils for your skin, you
Yeah.
know.
Hmm.
Olive oil, high quality olive oil, um, has kind of a, I mean, it's just, it remains, it kind of, I don't know, it doesn't soak in all the way. And it always smells like olive oil. So we decided maybe we would just use almond oil or something. However, you know, the ancient Romans actually did used to put olive oil on their skin.
My
And a lot of
mother,
people do that. I mean, just rub some in. Your mother did?
my mother always she did not cook with it, and it probably wasn't high quality olive oil because we couldn't get it. This is back in the 70s, but she would had it in a little jar and she would put it on her nails at night, and she had the
Oh,
most
interesting.
incredible nails, and she swore by it. This is how you do it. You have to put olive oil on your nails and cuticle every night. Um,
I'm
so
going to
think
try
about
it.
yeah, think about that one.
I'm going to try it. Well, the ancient Romans, I can't remember who it was. One of the ancient Roman writers um, wrote about, he kind of complained about these wealthy patrician Roman women who were spending all of their, you know, family's money on this olive oil from Sicily that was supposed to be like the wrinkle cream. Yeah, it was their fancy wrinkle cream. Was a, and I think it was the oil from green olives from Sicily was the key.
I'll have to try that.
We can.
So, how do we buy your oil?
My oil is available directly from me on my website, oleodeladonna.com, or through two importers in the United States. One is Oleo To Go, which has a very big online business, and they are great importers of Italian olive oils. And they have a good selection of products, and I'm kind of proud to be in their lineup. And then another importer is called the Rare Wine Company, and they import Tuscan olive oils. They're based in California, so that's another spot where you can find my oils. I'm actually personally sold out of my last harvest. So if you're interested in olive oils, you can go on my website, sign up to be on the mailing list, and I'll send you the announcement for the next harvest. Or you can find them from either one of these importers, Oleo To Go and the Rare Wine Company. They've both just received shipments that went out late last year.
When will the next harvest be? Or when will you start selling it?
We'll start selling it again in November of this year. So
Okay.
we'll start picking in October, and then first bottles go out in mid to late November.
Okay. So, in this interview, is there anything that you wanted to say that we didn't cover?
I think we've covered everything. I appreciate your interest in olive oil, and it's nice to know that people like you and then your students are kind of attuned to oil quality and the idea that there are different flavor profiles for oils from different places, which is what's so fun about olive oil. You know, it's like, you know, like you said before, it's like wine tasting. So I think I'm very interested to know that that has kind of caught on.
Oh, well, in my classes, and I said this during our break, we put the bottles of olive oil out, let people taste them, and then we're realizing that they're tasting and tasting and tasting and tasting because they are so in love with the flavors and comparing. So now we don't put the bottles on the table anymore because we're losing a half a bottle during one class. So we're limiting it. But yes, I think it's really eye opening, and I look forward to doing more of that because I know people will walk out the door and buy good oil. So thank you so much, Elaine, for doing this. I hope you'll come back on the show someday soon, and I hope we get to cook together someday.
That would be great. Thank you for having me today, and I would love to be back, and we should cook together someday.
Yes, I will come to you.
I think you should. Bring
Take
friends.
care.
Bye. Thank you so much.